here we are. We are live here on a capsule Think and Link. What's up with Jeffrey Morris?
All right.
Hmm,
Happy to be
got-
here, man. Yeah.
mm, We're going to do that. Hopefully that fixes things as far as audio from me. Okay, so we're good. We're live. We're here with Jeffrey to talk about his next project. And the capsule puts on these Think and Link events, and this is an experimental one. We're doing a jump in the middle and have a conversation with an old friend, an old client, someone that we have conversations with. And Jeffrey, we've known each other for like 15 years. When you first came to our, at least 15, when you first came to our office, we were like, who is this FutureDude? That is a freaking cool name. And can he live up to the name, to the title of FutureDude? I'm still very curious about that, right? And then and then you came by and we talked graphic novels, we talked design, we talked design of the future, and all kinds of fascinating things. And then you've done one of our Think and Links, one of our traditional ones a few years ago or a couple of years ago. That was amazing, and we had an incredible audience that people just raved about for many months after that. Then when you reached out and said, "Hey, I've got a project going on. I'd love to talk about it in this environment," I thought, well, let's try this. Let's see what happens. We have a conversation this way.
Cool.
So we are one first for the sponsor capsule. We are a special projects agency here in Minneapolis, working with a large number of clients across a diverse number of industries on really interesting special projects. And anything related to movies, of course, attracts us immediately, and hence Jeffrey's here. And I have to say, for audience sake, and I already cleared this with Jeffrey, that I know nothing of Space 1999, other than that's the year Prince made famous, and it was made a long time before that. And I've learned a lot since that time. But I have my partner Brian, who the two of you are very close friends, and to give me some questions. Like, can you give me like 3 or 4 questions? And he sent me a list of 14 questions to ask you, which we're not going to get to.
Okay.
But Jeffrey, if you don't mind, could you just introduce yourself and how you got to this moment in time, and then let's talk about that project.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm a writer, director, production designer. I've been involved in the film industry since the 1990s. Used to do a lot of commercials, music videos, documentary type projects. I'm really into screenwriting, probably, all aspects of film production. I dabble in some part of it, So, I've been running my current company since 2010. It's called FutureDude Entertainment, and it's named FutureDude. Actually, was a blog that I had that was all about my journeys through science. And, I have a background in science also. I worked some with NASA, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and education and public outreach with them for almost a decade. And I'm interested in science. I have been my entire life. So it's like my company sort of sits at the sort of the crossroads of science and entertainment and art and entrepreneurship. All those things are kind of part of it. And so my company, FutureDude Entertainment, is we're developing sort of original intellectual properties that are focused around science fiction typically, but with most of it is what we call hard sci-fi, which is based on science. And so that means that we're trying to make it what I call 85%. We have an 85% rule where we try to make it 85% plausible and leave about 15% for cool stuff that audiences love. But that 85% is super important to me, because that, well, I mean, it's like you can make anything up, right? But
Yeah,
when you challenge yourself to say, I'm going to tell a story that's based on realism and based on what's really truly possible, those constraints actually can drive you to new types of creativity. So
yeah. So it's got to be 85% feasible and 15% fantastic or unbelievable or out there in the future,
or awe-inspiring or like action stuff, things that like I said, they get audiences pumping and excited. It's you got to look that little bit, but the 85%, if you get 100%, then you're making a documentary.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just a little too much. You can't. Yeah, it's like I'm not watching a technical,
Right.
Yeah.
We still want to engage. We want to.
That's right. We still want to have fun. We still want to have fun. So,
Yeah. I love that. And so you have a Kickstarter going on, and you have a specific project you're working on around a specific vehicle from Space 1999.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, so we can get our
So,
audience familiar with
uh,
that.
so this show, it aired. It was a British science fiction series created by a gentleman named Jerry Anderson, who is very famous for creating all kinds of different sci-fi projects. A lot of them were geared toward children. There was a show called Thunderbirds back in the '60s that he did, and a lot of other ones along those lines. But Space 1999 was one of his first live action shows, and it aired in 1975, and it was I was 7 when I first saw it, actually. But I was a 7-year-old who was super excited by the space program. So when I heard there was a TV show called Space 1999, it sounded really cool, because it's like, well, 1999, you do the math, you go, hey, I'll be around for that, right? Okay, at least I hope so,
You
right?
did that. You
Yeah,
did
yeah,
that. That's
and so you
great.
think, okay, all right, so I'll be however many in, my early 30s, and I'll be able to, and so there was this, so the show was about a moon base, and people living, an international group of people living on the moon, and then a disaster occurs that ends up literally separates the moon from the earth, and the moon's, that part's kind of crazy, but the part I loved was the moon base, and at the moon base they had the spaceship. It was called an Eagle, and the Eagle felt like a direct extension of NASA's lunar module. So if you saw the lunar module and you saw what that thing was all about, and you project that a few decades in the future, this ship, the Eagle, felt like that. And it was in a lot of ways one of the stars of the show. And so it starred Martin Landau and Barbara Bain in the Eagle, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
So over the years, they eventually put out some toys. There was a very popular Mattel toy in 1976 that tens of thousands of kids had, and then they built model kits, and so it's like there are people who collect these, and they built all kinds of new kits. It's been actually increasing. Interest in this has been increasing over the last 50 years, almost 50 years, and there are collectors all around the world. And there's even a guy in Denmark who just built a huge one in his backyard that's like quarter scale. It's enormous, right? It's like crazy, right?
The Danes always doing the crazy stuff.
Yeah. So you go like, why? I started going like, why do people love this thing so much? It's like, I'm looking at this. This is one that I have that I bought.
Yeah.
It's made out of metal that was added to my collection a few years back. And I was going, why are they so obsessed with this? And the answer that I came up with, which is the central thesis of the film, is that it connects to a future that so many of us growing up thought we were going to get to have, that never actually came. And so I think in a lot of ways that spaceship epitomized that future and our dreams of being part of that future. And so that's really what we're going to explore with the documentary, is like holding on to that dream for 50 years. And now the beautiful thing is we're starting to go back out there, and we're actually going back to the moon and all these things. So it's like, there's been this, 1972 was the last time anyone walked on the moon. We're getting ready to go again, so. Yeah.
That would talk about an amazing event if we're back walking on the moon. But yeah, that's fascinating. I've heard a little bit about that, where people are disappointed by how we're not in flying, cars. We're not in the world of, we haven't achieved that. There's some pieces there that we go, why didn't we get there? I love that it's an extension of the lunar module. If you look at it,
well, I can actually show you. It's really kind of interesting. I brought a little prop action here. So this is a model of the lunar module, the lunar excursion module, known as a LIM, right? Yeah. And if you look, so the difference between spaceships and airplanes, for example, when you're in space, there's a vacuum, right? There's like airplanes, you literally have, the wing of the airplane is designed to basically carry you aloft, hold you up, right? That sort of thing.
Right.
And you bank based upon, working with the air, right? Using the air as a medium. There's no medium to work with in space. So you see these little thrusters here, right?
Yeah.
What these do is they would jet out little jets of nitrogen gas. And what would happen is that this doesn't fly like an airplane. It would fly at almost like right angles. It would fire jets, and then they compensate for the movement. And if you can see video of it, it moved in these little short movements. It was very interesting, very staccato, but it's because of these little thrusters, right? And the thing that was so cool on the Eagle is, if you look closely on the Eagle, They had the exact same thrusters,
Oh,
right? And you look at the rear end of the
nice.
craft, it's got these rockets on there that felt a lot. This felt very NASA. That was the thing about it. It felt like
Yeah,
a
yeah.
NASA spacecraft, So for so many of us as kids, I think, especially I think a lot of the kids at the time too, like me, were ones who, we were paying attention to the space program. We were listening, we were watching, we cared about this. So
Hmm.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the Eagle epitomized a future that, like, I thought I'm going to grow up and fly something like that. That was, really, I wanted to be an astronaut and fly an Eagle. That was
Yeah.
the dream.
Oh,
Yeah,
that is
yeah,
so cool. But
yeah.
that is the aesthetic of like space and of being in that environment, and how that now translates into what we see in most of these modern aircrafts. It kind of stands out as like it's aesthetically, for me, it's aesthetically awkward. I'm just saying it out loud, right? Like it's got all, but it fits. It fits space.
Oh,
It's
well,
more
the thing
accurate.
is, they
It's like
used to
it's
call the
more
lunar
accurate.
module, people considered it to be an ugly machine, right? Because
Yeah,
of the way it
yeah,
looked,
yeah.
ungainly, and sort of
Yeah,
bug-like, right?
it does.
Um,
It does.
and but whereas airplanes, you got all you think about like like a P-51, how beautiful and sleek it is and everything, right? Well, I mean, there's a beauty in the practicality of these kinds of ships,
Yeah,
everything. Whereas like the Star Wars ships, which I think are really cool, I like the designs, they wouldn't really fly.
right,
They just wouldn't.
right,
There's no aerodynamic capability or anything. Now you can make it look like it flies all you want with visual effects, right? You
right,
can make
right.
that brick look like it flies. But the thing that was cool about the Eagle, at least in a space environment, you could believe it could fly in
Yeah,
space and everything. So
yeah,
it was
yeah.
that was really cool. So in exploring this, I'm not only going to explore the fan obsession with it, and like I said, the collectors and the builders and those sorts of things, but I want to get into like the person who designed this vehicle, his name is Brian Johnson, and he's an Oscar-winning visual effects artist who worked
Okay.
on movies like going all the way back to 2001: A Space Odyssey, but then he won an Oscar for The Empire Strikes Back and Alien. It's another one,
Oh,
which
wow.
is really cool. He worked on another movie, Dragon Slayer. So there's so many like these touch points. And so for me, being able to get to know Brian, and I've developed a friendship with him, he was one of my idols growing up as a kid because of the work he did with visual effects. I always thought he was so cool bringing
Yeah,
these things to life, so
yeah.
he's going to be one of the key interview subjects and partners with us on this production, which is really
Oh,
cool.
that's cool. That's
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
cool.
Mhm.
Nice. And other people can, as you're doing it via Kickstarter, other people can participate as well, which I love about Kickstarter is that you get really involved in the project yourself as a donor. You can get connected to and be closer to the project, which is
Yeah.
really cool as
Yeah,
a way to
absolutely.
as a way to raise funds as well as engage people in this kind
Yeah,
of
it's like you're not just raising funds, you're raising awareness,
yeah,
by doing
yeah,
this, right? Which is
yeah,
neat. Yeah,
yeah.
and part of why we're doing this as a Kickstarter is because we want to maintain creative control. The story that I want to tell, it includes, we're going to have a real astronaut in it. That one of the astronauts from Apollo 16, Charles Duke, who walked on
Okay.
the moon, is going to be in the documentary. And so I'm going to get to talk to
Wow.
him about exploring
Ooh.
the moon, right, and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
kind of in the first part of the story. But then we've got actors from the original series from Space 1999, Barbara Bain, who's a legendary actor. Nick Tate, who's going to be in there. We've got other effects artists. There are people, scientists, all kinds of folks, and we're even in talks with some big name actors and musicians who happen to be fans of this,
Nice.
to come into the project, which is cool too. But when I was pitching it in Hollywood, there was some interest, but the response was always, let's make this thing. But like, what do the A-list stars think of this? And only them, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, but you've got millions of just everyday people, and it's really quite interesting when you
Yeah.
start like I run into folks who hear about this and they're like, I had one of those, or my brother had one of those, or I used to, it's
Yeah.
there's actually a cultural thing here, and I want to explore that. And so doing the Kickstarter was part of giving ourselves control to tell the story we wanted to tell
Yeah.
with it. Yeah.
And it makes sense that it's kind of if you apply the movie star to the math of 85-15, those
Mhm.
extreme, A-list stars kind of they lose that. They become so elite and so far out there and so
Yeah,
fictional.
exactly.
They're so
Mhm.
distant from us that they kind of eat into their 85% of being
Yeah,
more
I
real. And
totally
it's
agree. I
you
think it's part of what's going on with Hollywood right now, the strikes, the whole thing, right? there's a
Yeah.
vibe with this, with the way that Hollywood is skewed so far toward this side, that it's like they've lost sight of the, the everyman, the every
Yeah.
person,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Right. There's a bubble that they're living in. There's a place where they and they you see it pop out every once in a while where people call them out on it. And Ricky
Yeah,
Gervais has been good about that, of like, just stop living in your bubble and get
yeah,
out there and connect with everyday people.
exactly.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, that totally makes sense
Mhm.
for what you're doing to connect people. That is
Yeah,
so freaking
thanks.
cool. The fact that
Yeah.
it was only 2 seasons long, right?
Yep.
Two, it only
Yeah.
had 2 seasons, and
Mhm.
then it had such a massive cultural impact. It sounds like. I mean, it reflected on what was going on during that time period, and what we were seeing about the future in the '70s. Such
Yeah,
a
in the
fascinating look.
70s.
Yeah, in the '70s, looking into the future, and then now looking back on that, seeing what we saw and what we didn't see,
Mhm.
and where we are now.
Mhm.
That's a fascinating thread line you're going to be exploring.
I think
Super
totally. I
cool.
think it's really interesting to look at, like, what did people think the future was going to look like in the late 60s to the mid 1970s is a very different. And you also think about, there was an optimism
Yeah,
that was inherent to it at the time. There was an optimism. People seem to think like, we'll get there, and going out into space. See, here I'm going to add this. It wasn't just this techno nerdy geeky thing. There was a cultural side to this, where it was like, if we go out there, we're going to be at our best. We're going to get better. We're going to become
yeah,
better because we're going to be challenged. And
yeah,
when you see these sci-fi shows like Star Trek, Space 1999, they had diversity in them at the time that wasn't on a lot of mainstream television. Now, part of
yeah,
what that was about was saying, the producers were like, hey, maybe now in the 1960s it's an issue, but in the 20, late 20th century and the early 21st century, we're going to be past a lot of this stuff. And so they
right,
felt like they could show this vision of the future, and that gave a lot of us hope, right?
yeah,
It was a
right,
very, very
right,
positive thing. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, 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 yeah.
They start, but go ahead. Yeah.
No, no, no. That the depiction into the future of seeing our future selves like that,
Hmm.
and that was they were able to break cultural barriers that way
Yeah.
by having people
Yeah.
see that. But
Hmm.
you speak of the optimism and of the challenges that we would face. It seems like we've lost a little bit of that. There's like we didn't
Well,
get there.
where I was going is that you think about, like, by the mid 80s, you start having, even though I think it's a great film, but you have like the Terminator, right? And that's a pretty dark,
Dude,
very dark dystopic view of the future, right? It's like,
yeah,
robots are, the AI is going to rise up and wipe us out, or Mad Max. We're going to basically, if you think about Mad Max, in a lot of ways, that world is very much kind of the global warming trajectory that we could,
yeah,
right? If you look at the Mad Max world. So, I
yeah,
mean, it's almost like the sense of hope started to be replaced. Blade Runner, very dark,
yeah,
these dark dystopic things started happening in the 80s. And I feel like we've really haven't gone too far away from that since then, in a
yeah,
lot of ways,
yeah,
right? And so
yeah,
it's and that's part of what, when I eventually start and I'm able to get, some of my own sci-fi out there, I really want to start showing a much more positive view of, like, where we could go and how we could fix all this and how we could keep getting better and become
yeah,
smarter and
yeah.
a more capable species, so
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
It's almost like our fictional world that is being depicted through movies and entertainment, the dystopian aspect of it, and it's skewed toward negative.
Hmm.
It's almost like reality is becoming more optimistic, but the movie industry or that world is depicting such a negative perspective, right? I mean, you got two billionaires putting rockets into space, along with NASA, along with India and China. Though that one big rocket man putting a lot of rockets out into space. It's just like, how could you not see that as optimistic? But yet it's
Hmm.
often seen as very negative. It's fascinating culturally what we're
Yeah,
looking
no,
at.
I think culturally I often joke with my writing partner. We talk about the idea that culture's going in both ways at the same time. It's like
Yeah,
we've got two, completely different forces going on at the same time. We've got this completely potentially amazing future, and we've got a potentially horrible future, and it's like they're
yeah,
competing. It feels
yeah,
like they're competing. And I think
yeah,
that the thing with media, obviously, media can help chart the course in so many ways. So if we
yeah,
keep
yeah,
depicting it as negative, we start to believe it's negative. And
yeah,
what do young people have to look forward to? That, I think, if you look at a lot of the rates of depression and negativity that's in a lot of the young people, I think it's because we don't have a lot of positive things to see, positive things to report. And I think we have to change that. It's so important
Yeah,
that change,
I
so.
agree. I mean, I love that you're doing that, and all of your projects have that. You are definitely about the optimism in the future and seeing that, which I absolutely. I mean, that's part of why we have had so much affection for each other in business, because of that view of the world
Absolutely.
that you
No,
take, which I absolutely love.
yeah.
Because I mean, there is, and I think there's also a little bit of like, if we look at our current culture now, people have figured out, and especially in the culture of fear, that negativity and fear are more motivational. They get people
Oh,
to
oh
they
my
get people
gosh,
to vote,
you
right? I
could
mean,
have a whole podcast about that.
right,
I
right,
not only do I think that people are feeding off of this sort of cycle of fear and negativity, there's also this thing of outrage right now. If you think about it, right?
yeah,
It's like this idea that one of the things that really frustrates me about what's happening, if you think about like the algorithms on YouTube, for example, they're
yeah,
always sort of pushing up the things that are going to create more
yeah,
outrage, right?
yeah,
And so then you
yeah,
have this machine, and I actually literally I believe there are people who are almost addicted to outrage nowadays, right? It's like, what's the
yeah,
next thing I'm going to get outraged about? You know
right,
what I mean?
right,
Right? Instead of,
yeah,
and if you look at it, we're losing the ability to have sort of just calm, rational discourse, just to be able to
yeah,
talk out, have different opinions, different views.
yeah,
Think about that. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, people could do that. People could,
yeah,
I don't agree with you, but tell me what you think. Now
yeah.
it's you don't agree with me, so
Right.
you're my
I'm going to
ultimate
cancel
enemy
the
in the
hell out of you.
universe.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Right,
You're
right.
the enemy, man.
Yeah, right, right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Versus the very, but so that, but then there's a little bit of that in the world of reality. There's some optimism showing up, right?
Mhm.
With that big Elon dude and what he's doing, and the space program being focused on landing on the moon, and that is it's just there's some really interesting things in reality that are becoming
Well,
more
yeah,
optimistic, which is
absolutely. Well,
fascinating.
I mean, I think they're going to have some breakthroughs in energy generation soon. I think they're
Yeah,
getting closer to figuring out fusion. I think they're getting closer to figuring out room temperature, superconductivity. There are things like that that could be completely game changing if we could get them, across the line.
yeah,
And honestly, some of our problems, I never understand why climate change has become such a political issue. It's just science to me. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
it's and you literally can just look and track. And there's, if I can just say this really quickly,
yeah.
something that frustrates me is that when someone says something like, this is the hottest the earth has ever been, well, it's not true. It's not the hottest the earth has ever been, because I mean, honestly, when the earth first formed, it was a ball of molten rock, so it was hotter
Yeah,
then, right?
yeah.
And there have
No,
been time periods where it was even 14 degrees higher, things like that. But the point is, right now, it's never gone up from a low as fast as it is right now. So you got to look at it and go, well, why is that happening, right?
yeah,
We're,
yeah,
we're we're burning fossil fuels, blah blah blah.
yeah,
The point is though, the optimism could come in if we look at that optimistic and we say, right, we have an opportunity here. We can change this. We can change how we do things and actually make it better for everyone,
yeah,
and create new industries, new approaches. All that's possible, right? It really
yeah.
is possible for us to fix this and get on a different course, but we have
It
to choose
is.
to. That's the thing.
Yeah,
We actually have to choose as a
yeah,
group of people to do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Choose to focus on the optimistic side of it. I think that's one of the biggest issues I've had with the subject of sustainability. Yes, that it's
Mhm.
become political, but also just that it's become so negative and so bashing and so
Oh, I agree. I couldn't agree
back
more.
and
I couldn't agree
forth,
more.
all
There's no
kinds of
reason why it shouldn't
just
have to be that. It shouldn't.
no.
And it's I look at well, first off, I hate the idea that there's sides, right? There's this side and that side. I think
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I think happens when you study a lot of science, and especially if you study space and the Earth from space. If you look back on this planet from space, you don't see any of those dividing lines, and you don't see any of those politics, political groups or anything. It's just one big, extremely fragile ecosphere
yeah,
clinging to the surface of this ball that's
yeah,
floating in this vast emptiness,
yeah,
right? And you
yeah,
look at it like that and you go, those people need to get it together.
yeah,
Those people
yeah,
need to figure this out and get on the same page and fix
yeah,
this and move.
yeah.
And because it's amazing that we have an opportunity to do so many great things, but again, we have to work together and we have to choose to do it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, and
yeah,
focus the energy on the
yeah,
optimistic things, the
right. Instead of
inventions.
hating each
Yeah,
other and being outraged because someone doesn't agree with you. It's
right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it is such a fascinating thing as it
Mhm.
relates to this project and this particular thing. And you've got other things coming up too, which people could tune into and be
Mhm.
following you for as well, obviously,
Mhm.
because you're always doing interesting projects. Every time we connect, there's always something new. And I love that you get to spend your days thinking about the future, designing for the future, designing objects of the future, and doing that in a way that has a really core philosophy that is positive and as a beautiful view of the future versus violent, which is there's a lot of
Yeah,
violence.
I guess that is something that I really really try to tamp. I don't, something that I think Hollywood could learn is that you can have adventure and peril, right? And intense situations without it having to be ultra violent and without having
Yeah,
a lot of death and destruction, right? It's like honestly, just the quest to survive and especially against the elements in these circumstances, certain things like if you're traveling to other planets or you're being in space, right? It's hard enough. You don't even need monsters and aliens and all this stuff coming after you. It's hard enough to exist in space. It's like I've been trying to pitch stories like The Martian, for a long
yeah,
time. The idea
yeah,
that it's just human beings versus the elements of being in this kind of environment, so
yeah, yeah. It creates its own harshness.
it
Yeah,
does.
and it
And you can have, like I said, you can have action and adventure and peril without it having to be based on someone pulls out a gun and shoots someone, or we're
yeah,
blowing stuff up. It's like, and I think we should challenge ourselves to tell stories that get away from that and go
yeah,
in a different direction. There's only
yeah.
so much of that we can do,
Yeah,
you
and
know.
it isn't, I don't know, it seems like creative laziness to do that too.
I couldn't
It's
agree more.
Stanley
Or,
Kubrick
or,
and
or
his
like how many
approach.
times we're going to have car chases? It's like, I
I
get it. I mean,
know.
it's like, I understand. It's like, but I mean, I'm at a place where like, seeing superheroes bash the crap out of each other or, cars exploding. It's like, I mean, I get it. It's not like I haven't ever enjoyed seeing things like that, but it's like, I want to see other stuff too. It's like, I want to
Yeah,
see things that are going to, inspire me and get me thinking and get me take me to a place I've never been
yeah,
and I think that's what I want to see. That's where I'm
yeah,
going. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it is, there's a bit, the formula that you see that's out there, there's a bit of the
Mhm.
Hollywood formula. It is nice to see the competitive environment opening up as far as other people getting into the industry and that it isn't all coming from Hollywood. I think that's
Yeah.
definitely going to bring about new approaches, new
Well, there's an
views.
optimistic thing right there. The fact that we have technology now that's leveled we were literally editing videos the other day and we were commenting on how, 20 years ago, 25 years ago, we had to
Yeah,
go to a huge edit suite with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of equipment to do what we're doing on a little laptop now.
yeah,
And we're
yeah.
doing it at far better quality than we ever could have done in one of those huge facilities, right? And then
I know.
that's amazing, right? Or even looking at what you and I are able to do right here, right now, being able to
Right.
communicate with each other and
Yeah,
broadcast it out to people. These are all amazing accomplishments that this stuff
yeah.
exists,
It
Yeah.
is absolutely fascinating what can be done.
Mhm.
And on that note, we have expired a half an hour very
Okay.
quickly, which
Yeah.
is what happens when we get into conversations. Though we go for hours, which is probably we could do that as well.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you, Jeffrey, for doing this, for stepping up for us and having a conversation, and for us originally meeting and connecting way back when, because
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well,
you've
you
been
guys, Capsule has been, I cannot, I don't even know if I can describe how much impact you guys have had on my company and our intellectual properties and the future of everything we've created. I mean, it's like when every time someone sees our logo, that's you guys, right? They see Parallel
love
Man,
that.
that logo, that's you guys. It's like I mean, it's one thing for me to have creative ideas, but it was really cool for me to find cohorts that I could go and say, can you guys take this? You guys do, and you come back with something that blew me away, and it's
I love
it's
that.
extending the brand and it's extending these brands forward. So I
Yeah.
applaud you guys. It's been fantastic. What a great partnership. And no, I'm really honored that you had me on. I hope people will seek out. I mean, maybe if it's possible, you guys could share the link to the Kickstarter and
Yep. We'll do
this and
that.
everything.
We'll definitely do
I
that.
mean, we're trying to raise about $500,000 on there, which is pretty significant for Kickstarter. But we're also making a very high quality production that can be theatrically displayed
Yeah.
and that's super important to us. And it's going to be
Yeah.
it's really amazing when you go to the Kickstarter page for The Eagle Has Landed, which is the name of the documentary. The Kickstarter page, you can see all the amazing stuff we plan to do, and
Okay.
I think
I
it'll make
love
sense.
that. Yeah, we'll share it all over the place, and then have us. Hopefully we can get you there faster because of this, and because
We
I mean you have
appreciate Please.
to return the favor. You have definitely inspired us. So thank you
That's
for all
cool.
that you've done, and thank you for coming into our life and
Absolutely.
being a part of the Capsule team. It's been absolutely amazing. It's cool, man.
No.
All
Thanks,
right.
Aaron. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Good to
All
see
right.
you.
Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye.